Hello, everyone. My name is David Collette, and I'm the professor for this course. It's a pleasure to meet everybody. Looking forward to teaching everyone this semester and kind of hearing a bit more about why you're interested in the course, why you're interested in the subject matter, what your background is, and then how I can help facilitate your learning a bit more on that. But I thought I'd, of course, introduce myself first. My name is David Collette. I live in Basel, Switzerland, so I thought I'd kind of throw up a snowy out. It's not actually snowing here, but it could be sometime soon. And happy Christmas to anyone who celebrates or celebrated, and happy New Year. So I'm in Basel, Switzerland, and have been for the last 5-6 years. In the past, I used to be a technology leader for schools. So I was a technology leader for a school here, before that in the Philippines, and before that in Qatar. And Indonesia. I'm actually from New Zealand originally, despite sounding like an American, but I went to an American school, and so that's why I sound this way. So that's my background. But then I went to university at the University of Sydney, where I pursued teaching, and I became kind of a teacher and a technologist. And then I did my doctorate in Florida at the Nova Southeastern University. And I did it on the organizational leadership as my major, and looked at kind of online communities and online learning as my kind of minor or my focus. So that's kind of convenient, given that that's what we're doing right now, online learning. And so hopefully I bring some of that to here. And one of the key things of that is always hearing feedback. And so if any of you have feedback at any time or have questions, please feel free to reach out through the platform, through Moodle, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, usually within the day. My background on blockchain and kind of cryptocurrency and cybersecurity generally is a kind of as a technologist in schools. Obviously, cybersecurity was an interesting field. Kind of saw blockchain coming along in 2017, jumped in and started researching it in earnest. And one of the things about blockchain, kind of, I don't know, I guess people, is they get completely addicted to it and just keep going down the rabbit hole. And so that's what I did, and never really stopped for the last 7 years. And here we are today. And so really, I guess the key thing to understand about blockchain is there's many different facets about it. And so understanding the underlying principles of what it is, what it brings to society, what it brings to cybersecurity, and thus why it has value. And interestingly, value is intrinsically tied to its security. And so interestingly enough, often people think like cryptocurrency is kind of the gambling side, and then blockchain is the real side. But cryptocurrency having value is a key element of security for the chains themselves. And so we're going to explore why that is and how that matters in the longer term. One of the things I'd like to put in here as well is, as we will be exploring issues to do with monetary value versus fiat value, and why that provides there to be stability in cybersecurity. Like, so for example, Bitcoin chain has a certain amount of energy put into it, and so therefore it has a certain value as its bottom level. That being the case, it's important to understand that none of what we're talking about here is financial advice or advice to go and invest in cryptocurrency or anything like that. That's not the point of the course. The course obviously is to understand the underlying blockchain and cybersecurity elements, but some of those do involve price and the value of transactions on chain. So it's just important to understand that. Aside from being a professor at SUMAS, I am also the CSO at Parso.ai, or Parso is the company. We do interoperability for data, all data, but decentralized interoperability. And so the idea is bringing the data interoperability revolution to people, rather than keeping it in a corporate setting. I won't talk too much about Parso in this because that's not really the point, but that's just kind of my background if you wanted to check it out. And in addition, finally, I would say that if you wanted to see more about me, I have a website, drcolette.com. You can see previous videos or my dissertation or anything like that to get some background on me. So it's a pleasure to meet everyone, and I'm looking forward to this course with you. So the course is Introduction to Blockchain Technologies and Cybersecurity. Okay, so what is blockchain technology? And we're going to look at understanding the basics of the blockchain, and then in the next slide, or at least the next part of the video presentation, I will give, or at least I'm going to show the presentation I did actually all the way back in 2018, which kind of puts it in context in a more useful, easy to understand way. But to initially kind of explain what it is, the real kind of true definition of a blockchain is that it's a decentralized distributed ledger that works to record transactions across a network of computers. It consists of chains of blocks where each block contains a list of transactions, and these blocks are linked using cryptographic hashes. So pretty complex stuff. The decentralized nature ensures that there is no single point of control, enhancing security and also transparency. And so in the video to follow, I talk about blockchain kind of as Google Docs revision history, if you've ever used that. The same idea is at play, where essentially if you wipe away all those big words and you just think about what is trying to happen, we all just need to be able to see that something happened, that a transaction happened. And instead of going to a bank and them being the arbiter of truth, so to speak, we can have a centralized computer that can store that transaction and let us do it much faster, more cheaply, instantaneously. And until this point, it's not really been able to happen until they solved the Byzantine fault tolerance, Byzantine generals problem, and today's subject, which is the double spend problem. And we'll go a little bit into that in the next slides, but I'll let this next video kind of explain what that means, or at least the introduction of blockchain a little bit more in depth. But before we do, I think it's kind of important to understand why you would want this to begin with. It allows for three things: immutability, so the inability to change something, to change the past. So it's kind of a history machine, if you think about it. Tamper-proof, so you can't change it once it's already been put in place. So there's no censorship. And then consensus. Everybody has agreed that this is the truth, and there's no need or no worry that someone else is going to say, hey, that actually isn't true. I dispute your payment. You can't do that. It's directly on the chain, immutable, and tamper-proof. So that's the kind of the core fundamentals of blockchains, and why they are kind of the breakthrough that we think that they are. So the next part of the presentation will be me giving a presentation, and so I'm going to cut that into the video here.
Hi, everyone. My name is David Collette. I'm going to talk to you about the next technological revolution. A little bit ambitious, but I'm going to give it my all. Behind me, you see a classroom. Focus is on the center, the front of the class, where the information is. I'll posit that this is the classroom of 10 years ago. In the next slide, we see a classroom where the group work is the center. It's distributed. Students are working with each other. There's technology, but not always. And then the next image, hopefully, a glimpse of the future, the next 10 years. Personalized learning, students choosing their journey, choosing the technology that suits it with the teacher as a guide, but the student at the center. The shift here isn't about the technology. It's the paradigm shift. It's the movement from a centralized world to a decentralized world. A great example of this, I think one that we've all seen come to fruition, is the movement from Word documents, where the information was centered on the document, everyone had to crowd around it to get that information, to a shift to Google Docs, where anybody anywhere could access the information. It was decentralized, and it democratized and speeded up the process, made it more collaborative. This is happening not just in education, but all around the world. Businesses have seen the benefits of this. Uber for ride sharing, Airbnb, Kiva, microloans. And so the shift to decentralization is happening everywhere we look. But is it really decentralized, or is there further we can go? And do we want to? Is there a way we can actually really remove the middleman from this equation? And why would we want to do that? I live in the Philippines, and in the Philippines, 10% of the GDP comes from remittances, money sent home from overseas Filipino workers. She sends money home to her kids, and it costs her 10% of her wage each time she does it, taken by Western Union. 10%, that's crazy. If you think about it from your perspective, when you send money home, you can take like $50 that you pay to the bank, and it can take like a week to do that. How is that the future? How is that how we do things in the 21st century? Sending money from A to B, taking that long, and taking that much money. And that kind of question in the scenario has led to this. Now, I'm not going to talk about the price of Bitcoin. It's a whole other discussion. But I want to talk about the technology that underlies it, because Bitcoin is just the use case. The technology, the blockchain, is the real revolution. The blockchain is effectively a distributed ledger, where instead of there being a middleman institution, we split that task across different computers in the network. Everybody looking at the transactions that are happening and verifying them. That's a complex thing to understand. So let's try and pull it into something that we use all the time. Google Docs. Everyone uses Google Docs day to day, and you know in Google Docs how there's a revision history? The revision history is like the blockchain. It's the same mechanism. The idea is that when Alice sends something to Bob, you can check the Google Docs history because everyone has access, and we can trust that that happened. It makes it faster, and in the case of the remittances, it makes it cheaper. Now, currency is one thing, but there's actually over 1,200 different blockchain experiments happening right now. Bitcoin's just the most famous one. And everything from currency to distributed computing to privacy, you name it, it's being put on the blockchain as we speak, decentralizing it for us to use. It's about trust. It's about establishing a way for us to be able to trust each other using technology rather than having to have an arbiter of that trust, someone who to look over our shoulder to prove what we're doing. And by doing that, we speed up and make easier the process. Now, how's this going to actually affect education? And to be honest, I don't really know. It's like asking someone probably about 10, 15 years ago how Google Docs, how the cloud would impact education. Not sure, but then along came Google Drive and Google Docs, and it totally changed everything. And so I know that it will, and I know it's something to keep your eyes on. So instead of asking that question, let's ask this one. Have you ever wondered online why nothing costs less than $1? Seriously, like, why is nothing ever less than $1? The reason for that is because PayPal takes 30 cents on every transaction and 2.9% as well on top. And so it's really economically unfeasible or infeasible to actually make transactions less than $1. But think if you could charge 0.001 cent for any time you clicked on an image or a video or SoundCloud or a social media post. And at the end of the month, you might spend $5 to browse the internet. But the creators of that content, the people who are using their minds and reaching out and putting themselves out there, because so many people are clicking on that stuff, are making a living wage. Think about the revolution it would bring about to the poorest in our world. The ability to make a wage or make a living from actually being able to sell your content and your creativity online. The next technology revolution is coming, and it's going to be written on the blockchain. Thank you.
So, understanding kind of the basics of what a blockchain is used for, a couple of key understandings is important about like what the components of the blockchain entails, like what do they comprise. And so you have blocks, transactions, and a consensus mechanism, otherwise known as blocks, cryptographic keys, and hashing. And I kind of go through a little bit about what each of those are. So blocks are essentially kind of like files or containers for transactions and other data. So that's kind of like the information that you're putting into kind of a file. And then they form a chain linking one file to the other through cryptographic linking, which we'll go into in the course. Transactions are the record of those blocks being printed onto the blockchain. And so kind of the exchanges of value between different people and agreements of different ownership are shared across those in those blocks, but across those transactions. And then the consensus mechanism, and this will be something we talk about throughout the course. Proof of work is one of them. Proof of stake is another. The consensus mechanism ensures all participants agree with how the blockchain looks. Thinking about that Google Docs example before, like what is the revision history? And essentially, it's the technology behind it. Is it Google? Is it Microsoft? Is it someone else? In this case, you could have Bitcoin, you could have Ethereum, you could have one of the other blockchains being the core operator of the consensus mechanism, and that is being used to ensure the security. And so that's hugely important in this course. So we'll be looking into how that works over the space of the course. Cryptographic principles will kind of be gone into in the video that comes after this that I've incorporated, but it goes into a couple of things that are important to understand, and so I'll just mention them. The first is hash functions. They're used to secure data integrity by generating a fixed size hash value. He'll go into what that means. That's obviously complicated sounding, but actually it's not too hard to understand. Then there's public key cryptography, which we utilize for secure transactions and identity verification. Very simply, it means basically that I have a key, two sets of keys. I have the private key and the public key. The public key is kind of like my mailbox, and the private key is the keys to my house, but the mailbox goes to the house. People on the outside can see that mailbox. They can understand, the address, but they can't have access to my house. This is generally how it works. And then digital signatures, providing authenticity, non-repudiation. And so when I choose to send mail, for example, I need a stamp. That's kind of how this works in a similar way, but with cryptography. Again, not needing the post office to issue a stamp. There's been an invention that allows that to occur. So the video kind of helps explain it in a little bit more depth. So I'll let it take it from here.
Blockchains are incredibly popular nowadays. But what is a blockchain? How do they work? What problems do they solve? And how can they be used? Like the name indicates, a blockchain is a chain of blocks that contains information. This technique was originally described in 1991 by a group of researchers and was originally intended to timestamp digital documents so that it's not possible to backdate them or to tamper with them, almost like a notary. However, it went by mostly unused until it was adapted by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009 to create the digital cryptocurrency Bitcoin. Now, a blockchain is a distributed ledger that is completely open to anyone. They have an interesting property. Once some data has been recorded inside a blockchain, it becomes very difficult to change it. So how does that work? Well, let's take a closer look at a block. Each block contains some data, the hash of the block, and the hash of the previous block. The data that is stored inside a block depends on the type of blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain, for example, stores the details about a transaction in here, such as the sender, receiver, and the amount of coins. A block also has a hash. You can compare a hash to a fingerprint. It identifies a block and all of its contents, and it's always unique, just as a fingerprint. Once a block is created, its hash is being calculated. Changing something inside the block will cause the hash to change. So in other words, hashes are very useful when you want to detect changes to blocks. If the fingerprint of a block changes, it no longer is the same block. The third element inside each block is the hash of the previous block. And this effectively creates a chain of blocks, and it's this technique that makes a blockchain so secure. Let's take an example. Here we have a chain of 3 blocks. As you can see, each block has a hash and the hash of the previous block. So block number 3 points to block number 2, and number 2 points to number 1. Now the first block is a bit special. It cannot point to previous blocks because, well, it's the first one. We call this block the genesis block. Now let's say that you tamper with the second block. This causes the hash of the block to change as well. In turn, that will make block 3 and all following blocks invalid because they no longer store a valid hash of the previous block. So changing a single block will make all following blocks invalid. But using hashes is not enough to prevent tampering. Computers these days are very fast and can calculate hundreds of thousands of hashes per second. You could effectively tamper with a block and recalculate all the hashes of other blocks to make your blockchain valid again. So to mitigate this, blockchains have something that is called proof of work. It's a mechanism that slows down the creation of new blocks. In Bitcoin's case, it takes about 10 minutes to calculate the required proof of work and add a new block to the chain. This mechanism makes it very hard to tamper with the blocks because if you tamper with one block, you'll need to recalculate the proof of work for all the following blocks. So the security of a blockchain comes from its creative use of hashing and the proof of work mechanism. But there is one more way that blockchains secure themselves, and that is by being distributed. Instead of using a central entity to manage the chain, blockchains use a peer-to-peer network and everyone is allowed to join. When someone joins this network, he gets a full copy of the blockchain. The node can use this to verify that everything is still in order. Now, let's see what happens when someone creates a new block. That block is sent to everyone on the network. Each node then verifies the block to make sure that it hasn't been tampered with. And if everything checks out, each node adds this block to their own blockchain. All the nodes in this network create consensus. They agree about what blocks are valid and which aren't. Blocks that are tampered with will be rejected by other nodes in the network. So to successfully tamper with a blockchain, you'll need to tamper with all the blocks on the chain, redo the proof of work for each block, and take control of more than 50% of the peer-to-peer network. Only then will your tampered block become accepted by everyone else. So this is almost impossible to do. Blockchains are also constantly evolving. One of the most recent developments is the creation of smart contracts. These contracts are simple programs that are stored on the blockchain and can be used to automatically exchange coins based on certain conditions. More on smart contracts in a later video. The creation of blockchain technology piqued a lot of people's interest. Soon others realized that this technology could be used for other things, like storing medical records, creating a digital notary, or even collecting taxes. So now you know what a blockchain is, how it works on a basic level, and what problems it solves. Want to learn how you can implement a simple blockchain in JavaScript? Then check out this video here. And as always, thank you very much for watching.
Okay, and so having understood how a blockchain comes to be and what its component parts are, we can kind of look at a little bit of what the benefits of blockchain and cybersecurity is. And so the key thing is decentralization, being able to think about consensus of transactions and things like that without having to consult a third party. And you can think about all sorts of things beyond just finance. You got legal documents, DocuSign, for example, all sorts of different systems that we use a central authority, pay the money in order to be the arbiter of legal recourse that can be solved by using a technology that's essentially peer-to-peer. Distributed ledger allows this to occur. So the blockchain is what allows this to occur. And the advantages obviously are, you have a lot more transparency, resistance to censorship, but also security in the same way that open data and the open data movement ensures more security because a lot of people will find bugs and then report them rather than us relying on group of people to defend against all vectors. So in a similar way, the decentralized nature of these blockchains helps with the security of it. So that's some of the benefits, obviously. The other part of it, apart from being able to kind of just register different transactions that have occurred on a blockchain, is now that you have Bitcoin can now do it as well, but Ethereum is the primary chain that does this, but smart contracts. And smart contracts role is in allowing to, one thing to then cause another thing to occur. So let's say that the date of the month occurs, on a Friday, and that is the payday. It then releases pay to workers from an account that you have in your treasury, and all of that can just be automated. That's a lot of internal resources that you would usually use that can now start to be automated without even a bank to have to oversee those payments. And so it's interesting to think about how smart contracts built into these immutable layers can be used to both cause more efficiency to occur, but yet still be considered secure. And we'll go into a lot more about smart contracting. Open Zeppelin, for example, is like the smart contract safe house, where like most of the good smart contracts stored and are well vetted. And then there are people who make their own smart contracts, and so you see a level of divergence in safety practices. And so we'll talk about that in the course later on. So there are many benefits to using blockchain in cybersecurity, but there are also, key reasons not to use it. And so it really kind of is a choice dependent on the circumstance. And so we'll go into kind of why that is and how that is over time. So the use cases for blockchain in cybersecurity are often kind of referred to as secure data storage and transmission of data, because of the immutability we talked about before, because the encryption, and because it's decentralized, so you don't rely on a key central authority that may, it depends on where we live in the world, but may or may not be trusted by you, whether you live in a country that has trusted central authority or weak central authority. Kind of just depends which part of the blockchain will appeal to you specifically. Then you have identity management, being able to KYC and then enter and transact without having to go through lots of different steps in the local bank or local circumstance. Identity management is a huge part of cybersecurity and blockchain, and one that we need to talk about as well. Supply chain security is a good one. Again, tracking things over time and space. Auditing and compliance, and then decentralized applications, as we were talking about before. Now, a lot of the use cases that make the news in blockchain will be, money related, DeFi, decentralized finance, where essentially you can put money in to get yields or get money back paid based on liquidations, based on leverage trading, or many other different options. These often, obviously, have problems or are targets, let's say, of hacking and things like that. And so when we hear about things like blockchain has been hacked or blockchain is unsafe, it's the front end of blockchain that is the target. The underlying blockchain itself is rarely, if ever, hacked. Although we can talk about 51% attacks and which blockchains do get targeted, but Bitcoin and Ethereum have not been since conception. And so I think it's important to understand the layers of security that underlie any blockchain and what you're doing with it. Okay, and so looking at kind of the best practices for implementing blockchain in cybersecurity, we're going to kind of, as I was saying before, go through that in more detail as the course progresses. But I think one thing is to understand is blockchains are very inefficient databases, right? And currently databases are very important for lots of things. So Visa processes, I think it's 200,000 or maybe 2,500 transactions per second. Bitcoin can produce 7 per minute, or sorry, per 10 minutes. Sorry, per second, 7 per second. And so it's not designed to be a payment layer to compete with Visa. And to try and treat it as such is to misalign the purpose and the security concerns that you're looking for. However, FedNow or Fastnet, perhaps I forget the name, but either way, the large money providing or movers of large money, those might be a target because they move around the same amount of volume as Bitcoin does. And so this is kind of, I'm a little bit in the weeds, but I think it's important to understand that when we look at blockchain and cybersecurity, not the answer to everything is not a blockchain, right? Blockchain is specifically useful for specific things, and we're going to look at why that is and where those uses can be, and perhaps where they are not as useful, and we should, discard them in favor of the current solution. Cool. So kind of in summary of what we were just talking about over the course of this presentation, blockchain ensures security by virtue of being decentralized. Because it's decentralized, no one actor can be hacked. You have to hack the entire system, and the entire system is spread out all over the world. So they don't even know each other. So it's very hardened, and that decentralization enables key security measures to be taken that are beneficial to the security landscape that we can employ. Cryptography is critical. Obviously, the way to be able to interact with a decentralized system like this is to be able to have, like I was saying before, a house key in a mailbox. So you can receive information out here, but you don't, nobody can kind of come into your house and take your mail. And then consensus mechanisms. And consensus mechanisms is something specifically over the course of this course we'll kind of think about from the perspective of sustainable finance and sustainable use of blockchains in cybersecurity. The question comes where proof of work versus proof of stake. Proof of work is what Bitcoin uses and Ethereum used to, but doesn't anymore. But in any case, it's the mining that everyone talks about. So you have large warehouses of computers, very high power computers, burning electricity to answer these algorithms to produce blocks for the Bitcoin world computer, the network. And currently, I believe it's currently, I think, on the order of the entire power use of Ireland, perhaps, is being used each year by the blockchain network. So it's not insignificant in order to provide the security that we're talking about. And that's what gives Bitcoin its value, because that entire network is based on Bitcoin's price not falling below the price to produce, or the energy price to produce Bitcoin. And then obviously people's belief in it. And so the price of Bitcoin is actually intrinsically tied into the security of the network. And so it's kind of something we'll talk about a little bit more later because it's a little wider of a topic. And then if you think about proof of stake, which has just been introduced on Ethereum, we'll talk how it works later, but it doesn't use any of the electricity that Bitcoin does, like 0.01% of the network. And so it's going to be an interesting time moving forward to kind of think about how this is all going to work for cybersecurity, which is the safer network, the one that is using large quantities of energy, perhaps unsustainably over time, versus one that has shifted to a paradigm where it doesn't require that, but gives up more centralization possibilities. Okay, so that's the end of our exploration here of the presentation. However, I do want to kind of introduce two things. The first is the course module, the website on Moodle, and then also the case study, which is investing in Bitcoin as a use case. And so introducing you to Lynn Alden. Lynn Alden is she's an investor mainly, but also highly regarded as an author and participant in Bitcoin, and I highly recommend her work. She's our reading for this week, one of our readings. And so that's who Lynn Alden is. And the essentially the background to her expertise is in order to understand the investing world, she has to really deeply understand the technology. She's done the work to understand the Bitcoin network, and now she kind of explains this in this article. And so the task for this week will be, and I'll go to it in a second, exploring the reasons why blockchain, specifically Bitcoin, is considered a secure investment, and then a couple of elements of that. And so the assignment this week is to just write a summary of your thoughts on the matter, either for B or C here, discussing the security features of Bitcoin, proof of work mechanism that we just talked about, generating that computational power, but also potentially infecting the environment. And does that therefore have longevity? So those two topics is up to you to choose from, just that discussion point for this week. And I'll just flip over to the course site. So this is our course site. We have the discussion forum here. This is for adding any of the discussions for the week. So the one I just mentioned, please put it here under the double spend and cybersecurity. And you can just go down here and reply, and then reply with your reply here. Let's go back. And then if there are any general discussion comments or questions, you can put them here as well, especially for this week. If you could put an introduction of yourself into this section. So 2 posts, one an introduction of yourself and the other that summary here. And you can find the information about this on the post for this week. I'll put the video presentation I'm making right now here. The objective of the week, the reference presentation that I'm presenting from here, the readings, and then this is the outline of what we talked about today, as well as the assignment for this week. And if we can get it in by Saturday the 13th, I'm not a huge stickler for time, exact time periods. If you need to have till Sunday to get it in, that's fine. But in order to kind of keep on a course schedule, let's try and do it by the end of the weekend so I can read over it and get back to you, so we can move on to the next topic. So this is the course outline. Please let me know if you have any questions, and look forward to speaking with you in the coming week. And happy investigation of a very exciting topic that I think only gets more interesting with time, and as it gets more complex and you understand more about it, it gets more exciting. So welcome to the blockchain.